Okay, here we go.
Area like the visitor.
We are, I wanted to just jump back one page to page 141. And we'll just pick up a couple of paragraphs so we can get some continuity, and then we'll forge on ahead. Was there anything anyone wanted to bring up? Anything you've been processing? All right. That must mean each session is just completely self-contained, completely closes off, and you understand everything about it. So glad to hear that. Okay, so we've been in this chapter, New Problems and New Directions, and he's winding it up, and he's been basically talking about the effects of the second half of life and where this chapter was going as we lead into where we're going to pick up right now. He was talking about institutions necessarily being first half of life endeavors, and how we as second half of life people, as we move into the second half of life, we still got to be part of these groups. We still got to be part of these institutions. There's no way around that. And so how do we interface? How do we as second half of life people who have the perspective of second half of life now become a part and stay a part of groups that are first half of life? And so he's talking about how we can do that, how we can be a part of, but not fully, that we're going to end up being, having feet in different camps and so on and so forth. And that's kind of where he's picking it up here on page 141. So that first paragraph, that first complete paragraph, he writes, when I say that almost all groups and institutions are first half of life structures, I say that not to discourage you, but in fact, just the opposite. I say it first of all because it's true, but also to keep you from being depressed or losing all hope by having false expectations. Don't expect or demand from groups what they usually cannot give. That's one to put on the fridge. That goes for people too, all right? Doing so will make you needlessly angry and reactionary. They must and will be concerned with identity, boundaries, self-maintenance, self-perpetuation, and self-congratulation. This is their nature and purpose. The most you can hope for is a few enlightened leaders and policies now and then from among those 2 or 3 gathered in my name. And so that idea of identity, boundaries, self-maintenance, self-perpetuation, self-congratulation, we'll see it in every group. It's what we need to do as groups to maintain the identity of the group, to maintain the integrity of the group, to allow the group to continue to do what it was created to do. And so all institutions work that way, all of them, whether they're churches or whether they're companies or whether they're nations, it really doesn't matter. If they're your chess club, they're going to work the same way. And so we just need to expect that from our institutions. Don't expect institutions to do what only people can do. An institution can't be compassionate. A government can't be compassionate. A church can't be compassionate. The people within them can be. And if we have enough of those people who are compassionate, who are seeing life from a second half of life perspective, then that can leaven the whole lump, as Jesus said. That can create the environment and the tone for a group. So as I've said before, there are no Christian churches, but there are churches of Christians, hopefully, right? In your second half of life, you can actually bless others in what they feel they must do. Allow them to do what they must do. Challenge them if they are hurting themselves or others, but you can no longer join them in the first half of life. You can belong to such institutions for all the good that they do, but you no longer put all your eggs in that basket. This will keep you and others from unnecessary frustration and anger, from knocking on doors that cannot be opened from the other side. In short, this is what I mean by emerging Christianity. Now, remember, this book was written it was published in 2011. So that's 11 years ago. Emerging Christianity was still a big tag back then. It's not so much anymore, but some of this stuff is going to be a little bit dated as we go forward. Even Jesus said that it would be a waste of time to throw our seeds on the busy footpath, the rocky soil, or among the thorns. He told us that we should wait for receptive soil. I call such people multipliers, contemplatives, or change agents. Today, I often find this receptive soil more outside of churches than within, many of which have lost that necessary beginner's mind, both as groups and as individuals. That's a sad line, isn't it? That he finds the receptive soil more outside of churches than within. But I think probably a lot of our experience would bear that out, right? And they've lost the beginner's mind. They've lost the ability to see things as if new, to be able to let go of the bias, let go of the preconceptions, to be able to see truth as it is. That idea of the beginner's mind is so important, so incredibly important. And the only way you can maintain it is if you're occupying liminal space, as we've talked about before, so that you haven't drunk the Kool-Aid in any one camp. You're still able to stay on the threshold and see truth from where it's coming and not just where you expect it to be. Absolutely essential. Yet Jesus predicted it himself. The children of this world are often more clever than the children of light, which is probably why he made the sinner, the outsider, the Gentile, the Samaritan, the woman, the Roman centurion, the poor person, and the leper, the heroes and heroines of his stories. With so many good and sincere people in their ranks, the only way you can explain why the religions formed in the name of Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad became groups that defined themselves by exclusion and againstness is that history up to now has largely been asking first half of life questions. It is always interesting to me that the power of the keys that Jesus gave to Peter, both to bind and to loose, is invariably used to bind and so seldom used to loose, unless it is to the church institution's advantage. But when I remember that the first half of life defines itself by no, and the second half of life by yes, I can understand. I am grateful that Jesus himself was a teacher from the second half of life, who, according to Paul, always said yes. All right, gets us up to loneliness and solitude. Any thoughts on all that? He's tying up the loose ends, he's bringing it together. As you hopefully feel that you're moving into the second half of life, do you feel yourself able to say yes more than no these days?
Absolutely.
Do you feel that you can be included in multiple groups and see the yesness in these other traditions and groups that
Yes.
before were verboten?
Sure.
Was that you, Lindy?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You.
Just a small example is that I might have said it before in this group, I don't know, but I was taught to be fearful of anything that was Eastern. And so I stayed far away from yoga for so long. And I finally, with a hip problem, decided I better do something more gentle to my body. And I started taking yoga in a yoga studio. And I found it so lovely and not something to be feared. And I found many things that were similar to my faith, and I could embrace what they were offering me in that yoga studio. It wasn't really religious, but it wasn't a scary feeling of opening up the slippery slope, so to speak. So that's one area that I feel like I have a lot of affinity with people in that group.
That's great. So you could say yes to yoga.
I could say yes to yoga and some of the quotes and things that they say in there, then, and strange ways of defining chakras and, all those things that I was led to believe is going to impair my Christianity.
For me too.
What's that, Kathy?
I said that's just neat. That's really neat
Mhm.
that happened. That's cool. It's
It's a perfect example of what we're talking about here. So hi to Ellen and hi to Vaughn.
Hello.
Good to see you guys.
Can you
Thanks
guys
for braving
hear
the
me?
freeway, Ellen, and making it to us. Okay, so hopefully he's drawing a pretty clear picture here of this second half of life person who still has to live in a first half of life world. And I think that's the theme here. The world is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
I'm sorry. I was just thinking, I'm assuming that a lot of this is a transition too. I mean, you don't just turn off the light switch and then it's all of a sudden yes to everything. I think it's like a slow transition, or maybe it's as you kind of gather the wisdom of your second half of life, more doors open, you become a little softer, maybe more tolerant, more open-minded. I imagine it's kind of a process. It's not kind of you were that way yesterday and today you're this day, you're different, but I imagine that's what he's talking about, kind of the transition to that, which makes sense.
Unless you're Jim Carrey.
The yes man.
Gary?
Yeah. Then it's a light switch. And you say yes to everything.
Like an aha moment. Okay, I see. If it's more of a, that might be
Did you ever
different.
see the movie Yes Man?
Yes.
No.
Okay, then you don't get the reference. But that's there was a movie called Yes Man, and Jim Carrey plays the lead, and he attends this, his life is always a mess, and it's just, and he's scared of everything. He goes to the seminar where the guy says, you need to say yes. And so he makes a pact that he is going to answer yes to every question that is asked of him. And of course, it leads him on this grand adventure, because he can't say no. But no, that's not the way it works. Obviously, yes, this is a gradual transition as we become more and more rooted in second half of life perspective. We are going to be able to say yes to more and more because we will be more and more free. I mean, that's the whole point, right? We're not free in the first half of life. And we're certainly not free in an exclusionary environment where only one thing is true and everything else is false. So then we're saying no to everything except one thing. But as we start to move into this perspective, into this wisdom, this enlightenment, if you want to call it that, moving closer and closer to the Father, becoming more identified with the Father, who is obviously open to everyone and everything, then we can start saying yes to more and more things. We're not afraid of them anymore. We don't see them as threatening anymore. We can look for the truth in them. And that doesn't mean we're going to say yes to everything. There'll be things that we're still going to say no to, but it won't be because we're afraid of them or because that we turn them off because of a previously stated bias. It's because we have experienced them enough to know that this is just not our path. And that's discernment, and that's okay. But the judgment starts to fall away, and that's the key. And there's Jesus again telling us not to judge because that's exactly the problem with it. We know across the parking lot that we're going to say no to this one because it doesn't fit the mold. It doesn't fit the standard. And that's what we're moving away from.
I had a question. Many chapters before they talked about pain, and you can't move into the second half without experiencing that pain. So I'm wondering, as we're talking about this definition of the second half and what it looks like and how we could participate in it, it's like, I think you were just saying, the pain doesn't turn off and on, right? So are you carrying that still as you are participating in the second half?
Are you carrying the pain from the past? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, can you fully participate in the second half if you're still carrying the pain, different, whatever pains you may have.
Woundedness.
Well, if you're talking about, baggage, what we typically call baggage, if you're
Right.
talking about old resentments and unforgiveness and unconscious programs that continue to create obsessive compulsive thinking and behavior, no, that would be more first half of life trials and tribulations. As we move into the second half, we really do heal from a lot of that stuff. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be more traumas to face. And that doesn't mean that our stone is completely smooth either. But I think at least in the second half of life, we've crossed that 51% line, that magic line where we are now characterized by something new. Even though, yes, we have new bridges to cross and we have new mountains to climb, of course, and we always will. But so it's going to be a quality of character. It's going to be a quality of our worldview that changes, but it is gradual. But we shouldn't be defined by our pain anymore, Tony, if that's what you're asking. And that pain shouldn't be something that is still dictating the choices that we make and how we relate to each other. That much should be in the rear view enough so that we're present and able to make choices that really do positively affect those who are affected by them. Does that answer the question enough?
You sure did answer it.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Did Jesus say yes to everything?
No, not everything. He took his stand where he needed to, He said a big fat no to the Pharisees quite a few times, as I recall.
Right.
But think about it when, look at this list, that laundry list that he just gave us a little bit back, where he's talking about the woman, the Samaritan, the Roman centurion. I can't find it right now, but all of those people that his culture said no to, that his religion said no to. You stand outside the law, you stand outside our ethnic group, you stand outside, you name it. Jesus said yes to all those people, to the leper who stood outside of their community. He said yes to all of them. Now, when there was a behavior that was abusive, he said no to that and he stood against it. But when it came to people, and even when he stood against the Pharisees' philosophy and the Pharisees' system that was so abusive, he still would welcome any individual Pharisee and say yes to them. So, it's like that. And we're going to have to be the same way. We're going to have to be discerning,
Right.
Not every philosophy and idea is equal. That's for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, my mind went to, with myself, saying no more felt like an evolution in the right direction for many things, like, boundaries and, getting rid of certain codependent kind of behaviors and so on. So I know I'm splitting hairs and I kind of get the flavor of where he's going with that, but it's definitely, like Kathy was saying, it's not a all or nothing. And I'm glad you mentioned the yes man, because that was a perfect example of somebody who you can't say yes to everything.
Absolutely. But think about it this way too, William. In the tyranny of the finite, right? And if you're not familiar with that phrase, it is describing the human condition. We are limited creatures. We can only be one place at one time, right? And so whenever we say yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else. And so even as we say no and set those boundaries, hopefully it's because we're saying yes to something that is more a growth spurt or more of a positive in our life, so that we are moving toward the light and obviously, implicitly saying no to something else, but not just saying no for its own sake, or saying no out of fear, or saying no out of bias or any kind of judgmental standard, but because we're saying yes to something else.
Yeah. And it makes me also think of like that, the kid who learns that word no, and everything is about that no, and moving away from that childish, I don't know if that's the right word, but that kind of energy.
Mhm. And think about it, the no of the 2-year-old is really the establishment of the ego, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how the child differentiates itself from the parents and from everyone around them, by being able to say no,
Mm-hmm.
my way, no, not
No.
your way. So what we're doing in the second half of life is vanquishing the ego. We're putting the ego down or aside at least. So now we can be open and inclusive again. So it's kind of fascinating that way when you think about it.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying, William, too. As in the second half of life, we're saying no to, drama and, dysfunctional behavior. And, you're it's that letting go of all that stuff, staying away from it, staying healthy. You're saying no, but you're saying yes, like Dave says, to other things. So, yeah.
All right, let's see what he has to say about loneliness and solitude. There's some good points he makes in these pages as well. So he says there's a certain real loneliness if you say yes and all your old friends are saying no. So be prepared when your old groups, friendships, and even churches no longer fully speak to you the way they used to. I don't know if you have experienced this. Man, I sure did. It's amazing. And it's that idea of being on the edge of the inside that Rohr talks about when he was talking about liminal space. And David Brooks did a brilliant article on this and took that into the political arena. But he said, when you are really in liminal space, nobody trusts you because you're not fully drinking the Kool-Aid of any one camp. And so they really never know what you're going to choose, because you're not going to just choose along the party line, and they don't like that. And so you become sort of an outcast from any group, because you're not fully in any group, even though you may still caucus with that group, right? But you're in a different space now. And so when you do that, you got to be prepared. When your old friends are saying, when your old groups and friendships and even churches no longer fully speak to you the way they used to. But I promise you that those confusing feelings are far outdistanced by a new ability to be alone and to be happy alone. One of the great surprises at this point is that you find that the cure for your loneliness is actually solitude. Who would have imagined that to be the case? I am writing this now in my Lenten hermitage, alone for most of 40 days. I could not be happier, more united with everybody else, prayerfully united with the tragic sense of life on this planet, and yet totally productive too. Most cannot imagine this, I guess, but it is a different level and a different quality of productivity. Once a person moves to deep time, he or she is utterly one with the whole communion of saints and sinners, past and future. By the way, I think that is a good way to understand reincarnation. In deep time, everybody matters, has his or her influence, and is even somehow present and not just past. Now, as I was reading this paragraph, the cynical side of me came out a little bit, right? So here he is writing this now in his Lenten hermitage, alone for almost 40 days. He couldn't be happier and more united with everybody else, prayerfully united with the tragic sense of life on this planet, and totally productive. And, I was thinking, well, yeah, but he's part of the Franciscan order and all his bills are paid.
Yeah.
And he's sitting on a mountain of bestsellers that made God knows how much money, And so that was the cynical side of me coming out and saying, okay, is that easy for Richard to say and not so easy for the rest of us who still have to mix it up in this life and scritch and scratch and try to make things, that's not really fair. Richard has his crosses to bear just like the rest of us. But he does have the ability to sit in a hermitage for 40 days. And I don't think the rest of us can afford to do that, even if we wanted to. But at any rate, we all are going to have our ways of finding a balance and finding the solitude and the quiet, the silence that we need to be able to further our spiritual journeys. But I couldn't help being a little bit catty here after that paragraph.
I love that line. I think I need to share it with one of my clients he just started his recovery journey or his sobriety journey. And he had a couple of lapses and they were all triggered by loneliness. And I love that idea of when your loneliness is actually solitude, like the cure for loneliness is solitude. Like that is such a beautiful thought there.
And
Again,
William, can you tell us how that is true for you as you're reading it right now?
well, if I'm doing a contemplative practice and I genuinely feel connected to God, like that cures any form of loneliness for me. And I, this idea that every addict is on a spiritual journey, or a spiritual seeking, and we substitute the spirits we drink for our connection to the Holy Spirit, So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I don't know if it would do my client any good.
Well, this is why we keep you around, William, because that's a perfect answer. The idea of solitude to the Desert Fathers and Mothers and to contemplatives is not to be alone, but to be alone with God. And so there is a connection that forms in solitude, and it takes solitude and silence to be able to hear and sense the connection, because the noise and distraction of everyday life is what keeps us apart from it and makes us feel lonely and disconnected from everything that is unitive. But true solitude is what allows us to feel the connection and is the cure for the loneliness. So well said. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if your client feels the same way. I'm sorry, who did I cut off?
Jerry.
Jerry.
Yeah, that line. I was thinking about this past week as I was decorating my house. I was doing it by myself, and that's unusual. And but I found myself enjoying the solitude. There were times that at first I put on Christmas music, but I thought no, and I turned it off. And then I remembered the task within the task. So as I'm setting up my beautiful little village here, I was just, here doing it, talking to God, and then I set up my nativity scene, and and as I was taking all these ornaments that were from my children when they were little, I really and truly felt happy, and felt I wasn't lonely. At first I thought, oh, I got to do this by myself, and blah, 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 feeling sorry for myself. But then I got in touch with the second half of life and started thinking about, fond memories, and I was doing it by myself, and I enjoyed it. Like I said, I even turned the Christmas music off because it was distracting to the solitude and the quiet and the, I took each ornament and unwrapped it and hung it where, I don't know, it just, and so when I read that line, it was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened to me this week. I could really relate to it. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I love it, Jerry.
So with the solitude, so I'm an introvert. I love being alone, actually, ever since I was a kid. Does this work for extroverts?
I don't know. Who's an extrovert here? Do we even have an extrovert here? I'm not sure
I
we
think
do.
I think I am.
Okay, Vaughn and Lindy, answer Ellen's question. Do you think it works for you?
I'll go. I think that I am still an extrovert, but as I get older, I find I get a little bit discombobulated in groups and crowds, and I used to be much more energized by a house full of people. And I've been thinking lately how much I'd rather just be with, just two couples together, and or alone. And because that's when I get back my sense of balance, I guess. And I think when you were doing, Jerry, your ornaments, it sounded like you were very mindful of what you were doing. And so it's a way of just honoring the present moment and being very connected to what you're doing, which is in the presence of God. You almost always notice that I feel God with me. So that energizes me more than it ever used to, because in my extrovertedness, I always wanted to be on stage, up in front of a fitness class, just always with a lot of people. But now I find that that's still fun, but it drains me. And I need the quiet to get re-energized.
Richard wrote something exactly like that. Did we just read that? Where did I just read that?
Yeah, I remember reading that as you get older.
Yeah, he was saying almost exactly what you
Quieter.
just said, Lindy.
Yeah.
And it was but now I can't find it. But interesting.
Was it last week or just today?
I don't know. You know what? It's ringing in my head, and now I feel like I just read it, and yet I'm not seeing it in anything we just read. So it must have been earlier.
I found it. It's page
Later, it's
144.
later.
144.
Yeah, it says as most
Later.
people are older, you do
Yeah.
not choose loud music, needless diversion.
Oh, there it is. Okay, we just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah.
So I read it in prep. But yeah, he's going to say exactly the same thing that you just said.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? You know?
Mhm. Yeah.
Is that what Randy? Are you going to be in agreement? Are you feeling the same thing? Or
Yeah.
You still like to go to raves?
No, I've never liked to go to a rave,
All right.
but no, I playing in a band and such, the energy of that is something that I'm still quite attracted to. But yeah, there is Ozzy scratching the door. Ozzy wants to go out. I don't think I could be comfortable as an extrovert and have something, and also, by the way, when I say I feel energized with in the presence of other people, but it does need to be that, I don't know, we've got shared values and copacetic inspired. But I was on a Zoom earlier than this, and it was so easy to go past the hour's time. We were just energized off each other, which I guess can still be an introvert thing. But yeah, if I didn't have my solitude and stuff, I don't think I'd have anything really to give, if that makes sense.
Certainly.
Not that makes that synergy stuff happen.
Mhm.
So I just define myself by an extrovert because I do find energy from others in this meeting and such. But yeah, it's just, I don't think if I did not have my quiet time, that this would be something as enjoyable.
Mhm. Yep. But it's interesting, especially in Lindy's case, where there is a real kind of a change and kind of a move backward, even though she's, always been an extrovert and been energized in social settings, burning energy alone. Introvert's exactly the opposite, but now she's finding that, she needs and wants that balance as well. So that is exactly what Richard is talking about here in terms of this move, what happens to us as we start to get older, I suppose, but also move into this second half of life phase. Let's read that next paragraph so we can see him say what Lindy said. Basically, the first half of life is writing the text, and the second half is writing the commentary on that text. We all tend to move toward a happy and needed introversion as we get older. Such introversion is necessary to unpack all that life has given us and taken from us. We engage in what is now a necessary and somewhat natural contemplation. We should not be surprised that most older people do not choose loud music, needless diversions, or large crowds, except for John Gibson, I must say. We move toward understimulation. If we are on the schedule of soul, life has stimulated us enough, and now we have to process it and integrate it, however unconsciously. Silence and poetry start being our more natural voice and our more beautiful ear at this stage. Much of life starts becoming highly symbolic and connecting, and little things become significant metaphors for everything else. Silence is the only language spacious enough to include everything and to keep us from slipping back into the dualistic judgments and divisive words.
Oh, that's
I love that.
Yes, very well said. Very well said. And I'm a painful introvert anyway, but still, I feel that there is a different quality to the introversion. Kind of like what William was talking about. You know, we were talking about solitude. There's a quality to solitude that can cure loneliness, and there's a quality to the introversion when it becomes contemplative that expands it to a sense of connection and not just detachment. You know, sometimes we introverts just want to be detached. Just get me away from this, you know, stop the world. I want to get off. But there is a different quality to the introversion as you move into the second half of life as well.
I really relate to the sentence, much of life starts becoming highly symbolic and connecting, and the little things become significant metaphors for everything else. I notice myself noticing the metaphor of these things that I do, and appreciating that more.
And just noticing what used to be insignificant before, right? You know, what we just kind of barreled past and didn't give a second thought to. Now we start to see that they're significant. And sometimes they're significant only because we bring our presence to them. It's the presence that makes things significant, not the thing itself necessarily.
I'm so attracted to gardening at this stage of my life. I never could have cared about that before, but I have the tower garden. And yeah. And I just love going out and just pruning it, tending to it, watching it grow. And I just see the process of seed to the multiplication of things coming to fruition. And it is such a huge metaphor that I marvel at, and I just think, wow, God made all of this, but he made us so similar in that we can just do the small thing that can multiply out and affect so much. It's fascinating. And I was totally oblivious and thought, what's the big whoop about that one in my earlier life?
Well, I still got a brown thumb, so it hasn't affected me that way.
I'm not saying I'm good at it. I just, when something is growing, it's interesting now. It's not just blasé. Just because it happens all around you, you don't think it's special, but it is special.
Yeah. Amen. All right, let's read a little bit more. Hey, John, good to see you, buddy. Popped in there, kind of ninja'd in. So he was just talking about that poetry. Where do you say? Let me find that line. Silence and poetry start being our more natural voice and our more beautiful ear at this stage. And then silence is the only language spacious enough to include everything and keep us from slipping back into dualistic judgments and divisive words. Poets like Gerard Manley Hopkins, Mary Oliver, David White, Denise Levertov, Naomi Shihab Nye, Rainier Maria Rilke, and T.S. Eliot now name your own inner experience, even if you've never read poetry before. Mystics like Rumi, Hafiz, Kabir, John of the Cross, Teresa of Lisieux, Baal Shem Tov, Lady Julian of Norwich, and Rabia will speak to you perhaps more than people from your own tradition, whereas before you did not know or did not care what they were talking about. Like Jesus, you may soon feel as though you have nowhere to lay your head while a whole set of new heads are now making sense to you. This is true politically too. In fact, if your politics do not become more compassionate and inclusive, I doubt whether you are on the second journey. That last line I was thinking, because I always remember some of our people going to his school, Sacred Living School or whatever it was, and going to the convocations in Albuquerque, and they were kind of turned off and dismayed at how political they got, because they were very left of center politically. And so when I read this sentence, I remembered, oh yeah, well, that was 2011. So it was pre-Trump. So maybe he was able to be a little bit more inclusive back then. That's my cynical side coming out once again. But this is another great paragraph. And I don't know if you've experienced this as well, that that these poets and these mystics are suddenly speaking to you in ways that just bounced off your force field before. When you read a mystic and the crazy language that they have to use to try to express the inexpressible, right? It's like a foreign language. But once you start to experience it yourself, then all of a sudden it just clicks in. It's like that great line, how do you know you're in love? All the songs make sense, right? It's like that. All of a sudden the songs make sense. It just all of a sudden is coming into you. And these poets, someone like T.S. Eliot, what he writes is going to start speaking to and jumping off the page because you'll suddenly know what the heck they're talking about. It's really amazing how that works. Is anyone finding that happening to you? And also being able to listen to and accept the writings of other traditions. This is something that I was really kind of confounding the church that I was ordained at, because I wanted to quote Khalil Gibran, the prophet, and something from the Tao Te Ching, in Taoism, and I still do, because they are so illuminative of the same concept that Jesus is getting across, but we don't see it anymore in our own scriptures. They become so familiar. So to hear the same concept from another tradition, it sometimes has the ability to slap you in the face the way Jesus' teachings did originally to his people. And we need to be slapped in the face. We need to be knocked off of the complacency stool and be able to see that we can still be surprised.
But what I found also, not only is it, the poem, one can read and you understand it because of the experiences, but the same poem that I have read as a 20-year-old, and I read it as a 40-year-old, I read it as a 60-year-old, is now interpreted differently. So yeah, that's with life experiences. Yeah.
Perfect, Ellen. Yeah.
I think we can see why there's such a difference too with the generations, because let's face it, as we get older, we're dealing with the second half of life, and we do become more sentimental. We do become more interested in solitude and soulful, symbolic things. And not that younger people don't, but they're on more of the fast track of the first half of life. So there's a big gap, misunderstanding, and not being able to truly value the others sometimes. We saw that a lot in the workplace, older people with the younger generation. There were a lot of big differences and a lot of challenges with having them working together on teams, and they didn't always like one another. They didn't always value the same things. It was very obvious. So you can definitely see that. But once in a while you come across a young person that has this soul, and you just, I just look at them and say, that's an old soul. That person is beyond their years, even though they're in their 20s or whatever it is, or early 30s or something. And you can really see the difference, that they kind of stick out among some of the other younger people that you come in contact with. So it's kind of refreshing once in a while when that happens. And you all have kids like that too, perfectly, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of you might.
And it is interesting because just like Lindy with yoga and me with Khalil Gibran, to want to do yoga, to want to read another tradition was considered a betrayal of your own tradition. in the first half of life institution of the church that we were in. And now it's no longer a betrayal. It's not that I want to become Taoist or Buddhist or anything else. I am a follower of Jesus unabashedly, and I will be for the rest of my days. But that doesn't mean that I can't also say yes to truth that I see coming from other traditions at the same time. You know, that reinforces my faith. That reinforces my reverence for Jesus rather than detracts from it in any way. And I think that also is second half of life perspective coming to the fore. So I'm hoping this is resonating with you. I'm hoping that you are seeing how this is also playing out in your life more and more as you follow this path that we're all on. A little bit more. This is initially quite scary. Yeah, you think? But the issue is no longer is she or he in my group, my country, my political party, my social class, but has she or he passed over to the big picture? Members of this new non-group group can talk to one another rather easily, it seems. What some now call emerging Christianity or the emerging church is not something you join, establish, or invent. You just name it, and then you see it everywhere, already in place. Such non-group groups, the 2 or 3 gathered in deeper truth, create a whole new level of affiliation, dialogue, and friendship, even though they can still enjoy being among their old friends too, as long as they do not talk about anything serious, political, or religious. Yep.
I want to put a
That laughter
comment.
says it all, Lindy.
Yeah, I want to put a comment. I was listening to this, it was an NPR guy they were interviewing. So he's a gay person in San Francisco, but he's Republican. And he says it is so lonely in that environment.
Yeah, once again, you know, you got your foot in both camps. Who's going to trust you? And that's the problem with this, you know. That's why I value our community, you know, so deeply. You know, the effect is a community that is built on these perspectives and these themes, and by its nature is inclusive. And so, yes, there are those outside of us that look askance, right, and consider us black sheep at best. But within our group, we can have these different strains to our philosophy and our theology, and it's acceptable. It's okay. You know, we don't have to choose one or the other. It can truly be both and that's what we've tried to foster here these last 15 years. And I think we've done a pretty good job overall. He goes on, a kind of double belonging is characteristic of people at this stage. No one group meets all of their needs, desires, and visions. I bet that if you lasted this long with this book, you yourself are a double belonger, maybe even a triple or more. Colonized people, oppressed people, every kind of minority have had to learn several levels of belonging to survive and get through the day. For us more comfortable folks, it is still a stretch, but finally a stretch that many are making, perhaps without even realizing it. So here's another characteristic. Do you see yourself as belonging to multiple groups? And is that okay? You don't have to choose just one that's right and everybody else is wrong. So I know many of you you're both members of this church or a church, but you're also a member of 12-step groups. Now, for some churches, that's unacceptable, because 12-step groups they see as antithetical to the one step of Christianity. I've gotten that thrown in my face for the last 20 years. You know, I think of Ellen, you know, who is member of her church group, and then she's also a member here and member of other groups as well.
Yeah.
And she sees the conflicts, you know, as she moves from group to group, but she's still a member of the group.
Yeah,
that's
and I
okay.
found my Catholic church, St. Philip's, has a Saturday 5 p.m. So I go there for my Catholic mass. And I go to the Protestant fellowship because it's the fellowship I found. So yeah, but I remember the very first time I went, the first 1 or 2 years, I felt like I was betraying my Catholic church. When I first went to worship, I said, this is not how I worship. I felt I was betraying my Catholic church. And then I was able to find a good melding of it. No, plus there was that judgmental thing when I was speaking to another, it was a peer counselor, and I said, oh yeah, I find comfort praying my rosary. And said, oh no, that's idolatry. We don't do that. And I was taken aback. So that's when I called you, Dave.
Yeah, we talked each other down off the ledge.
Yeah.
But see, that's the sad part. I mean, you felt like you were betraying your Catholic
Yes.
roots because they trained you that way,
Yeah.
you know, and that is the problem. Jesus never trained people that way. He always trained everyone to be inclusive, to say yes to other traditions and other people, to look at the person and not the tradition that they come from, and see whether they're a decent person or not. Because really, in the end, that's all that matters. Are you decent or indecent? You know, not what jersey you wear. And so that's part of the growing up that happens in the second half of life as well. Anyone else belonging to multiple groups?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going to about 3 groups right now.
Mhm. And are they a little bit philosophically or theologically at odds with each other?
Yeah. I was just having this conversation today. I go to 9 o'clock Sunday at Saddleback with my son and his wife, and they invited me, and it was not conflicting with the 11 o'clock service that I've been going to with my husband and my other son, and enjoying and getting, something that I think is really valuable for my son with the brain injury. He's really resonating there. And so we go to both, and I realize that it's partially to support my young, son's family as they're showing finally an interest in attending a church service. So I want to be there, but I used to go there, and it's not unfamiliar to me. I just feel like I've evolved beyond that, and I found another spot where I felt comfortable in what was being taught, but also I thought my son Ryan was getting a lot out of it. And they're slightly different. Saddleback and Shepherd's Grove, they're slightly different. But I still, where I feel the most resonance, I suppose, is with this company of people that are contemplative and more open-minded, and less literal maybe. And yeah, so for me, I still need this group, but I'm also part of a family, and the family is getting something from these other 2 places. And that's where I don't find real conflict with it. I feel like I love all these people.
Even
I
though
don't believe everything the same. Pardon me?
Even though we are the best group.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's where my journey has brought me. I don't think most people at either of those churches necessarily would agree with what we discuss here. They'd probably say it's a little going too far. But I feel like Goldilocks a little bit. It's like, this is too much this, and this is too much that, and this is just right. And but I do see value in all not just the different religion traditions, but also the denominations within Christianity. And it's really loving people, trying to see them wherever they're at their journey, it's okay. And I'm trying to get there. So I can be comfortable in all settings.
Mhm.
And that's it, right? To become unoffendable
Mhm,
and to become unflatterable. I mean, that's the position of freedom,
mhm.
you know, but we've got to get there. And the way we do it is when we're comfortable in many different places. Even though we may have our intellectual druthers and preferences.
I respect the seeker, you know. Did you freeze?
Did who?
No.
Did I freeze?
Nope, you're still there. We lost Judy at one point. I don't know if she's back.
Okay, I just was saying, I respect people who are turning their face toward God.
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're with us.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
But every now and then we have to blink or something, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, I know that Dave was frozen there for a
Oh.
second. I wasn't sure if everybody was, but
Oh, am I back?
you're there, yeah.
Okay,
Sometimes if somebody else is frozen, they can't hear you either, so.
right.
Um,
right.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was saying. Do you guys know what I was saying?
Yeah, you were saying that you are comfortable now in all these different groups and they all have something to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yeah, one's not right and the other wrong. They all are offering
I
something.
know what it was. I really respect the seeker, the people who are seeking God. And maybe we haven't all landed in the same place, but I just think God is happy when people turn their face to see him. And we all take different amounts of time to hear what he's trying to say.
Mhm.
So
You know, on that note, that's interesting that you say that too, because I have a couple of friends and they're good friends and they're proclaimed atheists. They just, and one friend of mine, she's just this beautiful believer in science and she follows science and she learns and she loves all the stuff about space and she's just, you know, so we don't talk heavily about religion as much, but I listen to her and I love her passion for science, and she knows that I belong to a church and what I believe in, and so it's kind of like, you know, I respect the mysteries of her science, that there's mysteries out there that she doesn't understand yet, and I said, and I love the mysteries of my shared religion with my community too. So it's a similar thing, but just in a different plane or different playing field, I guess. So, but we sort of still just find that we have a friendship and we can have that friendship and we're both very respectful of each other and, you know, and so it's just been interesting. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, you have to be in my camp or not. We just don't go there anymore. And we're both of kind of the same age group. So we're probably maybe a little more tolerant as old as we are now and getting into our second half of life. So it's been okay.
I think the 12-step program kind of allows for, you know, people to say, you know, they have to depend on a higher power without defining it. And as clearly and as literally as I grew up, where, well, your higher power is God and it's Jesus, and don't, you know, be so nebulous about it. But I think it allows people to learn and be on the path without jumping into claiming something they're not ready to claim. So I think we all just kind of get more comfortable depending on what we're exposed to. And so being exposed to 12 steps helped me to not make people say they believe just like me. Just call it your higher power. I don't think God is as offended as we think he is by that.
Yeah, guess what? If we're supposed to become unoffendable, what
Yeah,
does it say about God?
right.
Exactly.
Unoffendable to perfection.
Mhm.
Good stuff. This is great. I'm hoping that we are, you know, every time, and especially as he's wrapping up the book now, we're getting a clearer and clearer picture of the experience and the realities of a second half of life perspective. and where that takes us in relation to each other and relation to life and just in the way that we process. So hopefully all of this is giving you a clearer and clearer picture. And hopefully it's also showing you where you are, in the journey, because that's important for us to be able to plot ourselves on the map and know where we are and be able to continue the journey with, as much conviction as possible. So this is all great. Okay, well, that's it for 2022, huh? Wow.
Well, if I may interject.
Uh-oh.
So, no, Dave and I did a little podcast thing a couple days ago, and it's a Facebook group I'm starting. I'm going to be reading from the book and basically kind of doing what we do every Wednesday. But I'd like to have people come in and interject as well, commentaries, read a paragraph or two. And then if no one's there, I will comment on it, but have other people say, oh yeah, this is what's going on in my life. And this is why I understand him saying. And, frankness, what it's designed to do is introduce this paradigm to an audience that wouldn't be exposed to it otherwise, but also to introduce Dave and the effect to an audience that wouldn't be exposed to it. This is, what I am a huge fan of what is offered here. And I think a lot of people would benefit from it. So I'm starting this Facebook group and stuff and inviting friends. But if I haven't invited you yet, I will again. I will probably if you're on Facebook. But I really don't want this to be a monologue for me. I'd like to have other people do it as well. So
I'll tell you what, Randy, why don't you give me the link to that? And then I'll send it out to everybody when I send out the recording here.
Thank you.
And that way people
did it in
have
that
to get back to me.
text.
Say again?
Yeah. So what I sent you in a link is the Facebook group.
Okay. Well, send me whatever is the clearest way to get through the podcasts, and then I will share it with the group.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, got it. So that will be very cool. All right. Now we're done for 2022, but we're not done with the book. So we'll be reconvening after the first, what day is that going to be? 2023, January 4th will be the next time that we meet together. So January 4th, 6:30, and we'll pick up where we left off with both and thinking, and instead of either or, and then we'll kind of finish up and then we'll get serious about what we're going to do next. So we'll be talking about that as well. But for those of you who I'm not going to see, because Zoom is the only place that we connect, have great holidays and have a wonderful New Year, and we'll see you after the 1st. And hopefully you'll still see us on Sundays. And if it's at all possible for those of you who live close enough in the area, we have our Christmas dinner and gathering on the 23rd, which will be a week from this Friday. No, 2 weeks from this Friday, right?
No, a week from
No,
this.
that's
Week
one
from
week.
this
A week
Friday.
from this Friday.
Week from this Friday, so the
23rd.
23rd. Yeah, so the 18th, this Sunday, is our Christmas service, and then the following Friday is the dinner, and then we sign off until after the 1st as well, or on the 1st. So anyway, hopefully we'll see you there or somewhere in the mix. But at any rate, have happy holidays if we don't see you between now and then. And Scott, would you go ahead and close us off some?
Father God, we're grateful to be here. We'd spend time with you and with each other, searching, encouraging, and exploring the different meanings of what the second half is supposed to look like and how to put it to good use. Thank you, God, for illuminating this subject with us in our hearts and our minds. Help us to learn all we can learn, Lord, so we can be in service to each other and in service to you. We love you, Lord. It's in your precious name we pray. We give our thanks and say our amens. Amen.
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 All right, love you all. See you soon.
Love you.
Bye, Cassie. See you
Good
Sunday.
night.
Bye, see you
Thank
Sunday.
you, everybody.
See you
All
Sunday on
right,
the
good
others.
night.
Bye.
Bye, Lindy.
Bye.
John. Bye, Tony.
See you
Bye,
Sunday,
everyone.
guys.
Okay, Sunday.
You there.
Bye, William.
Thank you.
Bye, Jordana and Linda. See you guys
See you guys on
Sunday.
Sunday.
And you too, John.
Thank you.
Sunday, man.
I'll be there. I won't be shopping. like I was today.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. All right. See y'all
Bye,
then.
you guys. See you.